Hey, what is up, squad? We are back with some more Solo Leveling Season 2, Episode 12, Cut content, as we always check out, right? I'm curious to see what they cut out. I can't think of anything at the top of my head apart from the elderly couple that we already saw a little bit cut out. I'm not sure, I can't remember if there was anything else though. But yeah, if you guys want early and uncut reactions, make sure to check out the Patreon, and let's just get right into it.
If every episode got the same treatment that this one did, then Perfect wouldn't even begin to describe this adaptation. I'm not just talking about the stellar animation.
It was a
which brought
fucking
this
amazing
to life, but
animation.
also the pacing, tone, and even anime original changes which built upon it.
Yep.
Like, we know the Ant King has a skill which allows him to obtain the powers of those he eats, yet in the manhwa and novel he doesn't even use them. He has 5+ S ranks in his stomach, yet for some reason doesn't make use of any of their abilities.
Okay.
So, to see the Ant King use these ice powers here in the anime, well, that's a change I very much welcome.
Oh, so that was a
It shows
change.
the Ant King is constantly evolving in a way that perfectly suits him.
Okay.
This then allowed
I
them
didn't
to
know
make
that.
the fight a lot more even, which in comparison to the novel and manhwa, was, as you'd expect, a one-sided beatdown. So, it's here the episode sees its biggest changes since a large majority of the fight was given through the perspective of others. It's an interesting way to portray what's usually Sung thinking about how strong he's grown. So, if you want to see how this climactic fight differed between all three mediums, stick around as we'll go through all of it.
Okay. I'm curious.
But first, if you've ever wanted to have Rimuru job and build a city just like Tempest, now
This is
you
a game
can,
ad?
as a slime
Okay, it's a
the
game
world
ad.
constantly open new Runa, or you can let line fill them that cumulative
Skip the
blacksmith
game
depth
ad,
to get as a
guys.
base of Rimuru that is of 18 to 121 from the web novel. Let's
Okay.
start things off over at the TV station where, unlike how in the anime the feed disconnected due to a connection issue, the broadcast was actually cut off by the director himself.
Alright.
As damaging as it was to his TV station, it was too much to show the country their strongest hunters getting destroyed by a single
I mean, it
hit.
makes sense.
He refused to broadcast Ma's torture then Min's subsequent death. This was when he believed everything was over, up until someone would report someone else had appeared on scene.
Yep,
The
until
director
Sanjay Mu came.
believed the only person who could save him was Jesus, but what he saw on screen was probably close enough. No one could tell who it was or what they were capable of, but the presence of someone so apparently confident was enough for the director to make a gamble on him.
Yep.
There was a chance this person may not have been a hunter at all, but now the director was determined to see this broadcast through. It's then the story would rewind to a bit before Sung's arrival, where an emotional perspective was given from the cameraman.
Okay.
Despite being backed into a corner, he had zero regrets knowing this was his equivalent of going out in a fiery blaze of glory. He didn't consider himself a true hero like the S-ranks who fought in front of him, but he was intent knowing he could at least support them.
Yep.
So, where before his life was nothing but menial jobs intended to slowly grow his career, now he was faced with an opportunity he'd never thought he'd get to be a part of. His position as a hunter, though one he wasn't very fond of, had allowed him to capture something no
So
other
it's just
cameraman
little
on
bits
Earth
of
has.
context.
He had shown the world his own country's hunters successfully defeating the boss of an S-rank gate.
Yeah.
So, knowing he was the person who captured such footage, well, deep down he was incredibly proud since everyone would get to see the valiant sacrifice of the hunters who fought for them. To him, his life's work as both a cameraman and hunter was coming to fruition.
Yep.
If there was one thing he did feel regretful over though, it was the devastating thought of never being able to see his father again. You see, as the person who took care of him after his mother died of cancer, knowing he'd never get to say goodbye really hurt. What went to hurt even more was that his last words were so mundane that the cameraman couldn't help but wish they could have talked for
Have
at
you
least
eaten
a
yet?
little bit longer.
Damn.
Just as life always seemed to be though, time was ruthless and regret always arrived one step too late.
Yep.
So, with zero energy left to activate any of his tank skills, the cameraman would apologize to his dad, then accept whatever fate was about to come to him. What happened next was an incomprehensible sequence of events, since in one moment he was being saved by this shadowy figure, then the next a person he'd never seen before was forcing him to drink something.
Exactly.
Seconds later he was fully healed, and that's when the cameraman would finally realize this could be the person he thought it was. It was a truly perplexing turn of events I'm sure would shock anyone. Now, the reason Sung didn't show up sooner was because the broadcast he was watching was delayed.
It's delayed, right?
By the time he realized it was 10 minutes behind, the damage to Korea's S-ranks had already been done.
Fuck.
Luckily for him, he was able to save the weakest person present first. Sung's action after would be the most important.
Bro, that is a
since
sick
with the
panel.
other S-rank still in a dire situation, he needed a way to clear the ants without injuring those they were attacking. The easiest way would have been to just use Tusk, but there was no guarantee such an attack wouldn't hit the others too. So that's when he decided to go with Iron, using his taunt skill to divert the ants' focus pretty much immediately. Sung would praise Iron for a job well done, then summon the rest of his soldiers to eliminate as many ants as possible. So, given that Beck now had an opening, he would move his teammates to the safest corner he could find, then finally take in what exactly was happening. Ma, who'd had his eyes injured in the fight before, could only ask to know what it was Beck was seeing. It was a question to which Beck would answer everything was okay now, since for him that's exactly what he was feeling. That reassurance was actually more for himself though, since it was only moments ago Beck fully
was about to
believed
die,
he was
right?
going to die.
Yep.
He had even subconsciously called out for help the moment Sung made his entrance. So, to see Sung easily handle these ants that gave them so much trouble, well, that provided Beck with a huge sense of relief.
Pretty much huge confidence,
his hope
right?
of survival was now fully rekindled. As far as he was concerned, the aid of Sung was far more reliable than the power of over 20 Japanese S-rank hunters combined.
Yeah.
He knew all he needed to do now was just sit back and watch. Beck would then tell the cameraman to keep the camera pointed at Sung because as someone who'd glimpsed his power so many times before, Beck knew the country would want to witness the amazing show he was about to put on. After hearing all about Sung through the experiences of others, Beck sat eagerly anticipating a power he'd finally get to witness himself for once.
Yeah. After getting the reports, he finally gets to see it with his own eyes.
The job of the cameraman was far from finished. It was by the time he realized what he needed to do though that Sung would have cleared almost half the ants already. He had killed so many he actually lost count, and it was so easy that he found himself completely unbothered by them. Compared to the enemies of the Demon Castle, these ants were quite literally just that.
True.
That's when Sung would decide to clear the ants out faster, leading him to resurrect the dead ones without a care.
Yeah, they didn't resurrect it, eh?
Unlike how the anime didn't even show it, Sung wasted no time creating more soldiers for his shadow army.
I noticed that.
He didn't even bother to hide it either, so everyone across the world bore witness to his shadow extraction ability.
Yep.
None could actually understand what it was, but this ability was definitely no longer a secret now.
Yep.
So, the cameraman was the first to be overwhelmed by the shock of it, since shadowy ants pulling themselves from the ground was far beyond his own personal scope of comprehension. Beck was a little more calm himself, but with this being his first time witnessing Sung's summons as well, he was more so in a state of awe. Now,
because it's bringing back the dead, right?
The shadows to outnumber the living, so with Sung's army of darkness pushing back their counterpart, all those watching gained a little hope again. It was a stark contrast from the bleak despair they felt only moments ago.
Damn.
Since the last thing they saw was the Ant King dismantling their hunters, what the viewers were experiencing was quite literally a roller coaster of emotions. Victory seemed assured when the Queen was defeated, then defeat seemed imminent after the Ant King came.
Bro, that was crazy. I got chills, bro, when the music came on, dude. Chills.
Then everyone was in a frenzy wanting to know what happened after. They couldn't bear not knowing what happened to the other hunters. It was once the feed was restored and victory appeared in sight again that Sung's one-sided massacre would bring forth all sorts of emotion.
Yeah.
Most were ecstatic by the sudden turn of events, while those who lost loved ones shed tears knowing revenge was near for them. None knew who this mysterious hunter on their screen was, but what they did know was that they wanted to cheer for him. It was excitement that only escalated when they found out he was a Korean too.
Yep.
For the TV director who'd been stressed for some time now, finally he could breathe a sigh of relief since it was looking like his gamble paid off.
Bro, it's so different. The monolith
like the
design
was coming to an end, but the arrival of Sung showed him the light at the end of the tunnel. It was the greatest feeling to know things might work out okay. The remaining hunters just needed to make it to extraction.
Yep.
For the Japan team who withdrew already, any agreement made with them was now null and void. Any loot would no longer be shared, and if Korea wanted, they definitely had a right to demand reparations themselves.
True.
Things certainly weren't going the way Japan expected. Matsumoto had thought he planned for every possible situation, yet somehow a single monster had managed to get the best of him. So shock couldn't even begin to describe what he was feeling right now. To make matters worse, his team couldn't even track where that monster was anymore.
Which I find kind of crazy, no?
They'd used to monitor the energy levels of the queen now couldn't find a monster that was significantly more powerful.
Yeah.
So the whole thing just didn't make sense to them.
Was it the
They
camouflage?
were able to spot it back when it fought Goto, but the large bright light which indicated its powerful presence before was now nowhere to be seen. Not a single speck of light indicated that level of power anywhere. At first, such an anomaly was utterly incomprehensible, up until Matsumoto realized what was really happening. You see, as soon as he thought about it a little bit longer, that's when he understood how this monster was hiding itself.
Okay.
It had perfect control over its magical energy and, as a result, could turn it on and off whenever it wanted.
That makes sense.
This was why the research team failed to spot it before the raid, and it's the reason why Goto ended up being defeated by it. Japan had assumed their satellite data was all they needed, so never once did they consider the possibility of anything beyond.
That's why you gotta do some,
It didn't occur to them that the ants would evolve in a way that could deceive them.
Gotta do some,
So, this was
recon.
what Matsumoto would consider the perfect failure, and as a result, this single oversight would cost them dearly. It was a steep
they really
price
did
he
get
fully
fucked,
expected to get worse, since to him, it was only a matter of time before this monster crossed the ocean and reached the mainland. And with no hunter capable of standing against it, well, let's just say the potential calamity was terrifying.
Dude,
it was then that
that's crazy,
Matsumoto's team would relocate the monster back in the Queen's chamber, indicating it was no longer suppressing its magical energy like how it was before.
Yep.
This made Matsumoto assume it was fighting the Korean team, which, if all went well, would take them out too. It was a potential silver lining he thought he could get his hopes behind, up until a separate spot of light indicated another strong presence.
Yep.
At first glance, this light seemed to be as big as the monsters, but on closer examination it actually looked bigger. Not only that, but this second light was also surrounded by hundreds of smaller ones. Sung's shadows were so individually strong that each could be viewed as their own powerful presence by Japan's satellite. It was an oddly beautiful phenomenon none of Japan's researchers had ever seen before. Matsumoto would then demand to watch the Korean broadcast himself, unveiling the live-action version of what the satellite was showing him.
Yep.
The part of it that made their observations all the more terrifying was the fact the massive source of light was confirmed to be coming from one single person. No one could believe this lone hunter was capable of producing all that.
Damn.
Chairman Go's reaction was exactly as we saw, but if you're wondering why he wasn't in the mission control room from the get-go, it's because his weak heart wouldn't have been able to handle it. I mean, we saw how excited he got just from seeing Sung, and even that was enough to give him a heart attack.
That's fair.
So, whether the mission ended in success or failure,
it's rough when you're old,
being part of it was too much of a risk for him. It's the reason we see his personal doctor next to him in the manhwa. Seeing Sung extract the shadows of the dead wasn't good for him either, since that too got his heart racing a mile a minute. It did also show that Sung had hid the truth from him, but that didn't matter considering what he was doing now. At this point, the chairman was only curious about why Sung didn't want to join the fight before. He could see just how excited Sung was to be there, so for a man who proclaimed to only want to fight monsters, the chairman couldn't understand why he walked away from the opportunity to fight.
He wanted to spend time with family, man.
It was a thought Mr. Go really hoped to get an answer to.
I thought he did.
Back home,
didn't he visit?
Was different too, since before exchanging, he wasn't chilling on a rooftop like
he was chilling on a street, right?
Was actually at home watching the raid with his mother.
No, but wasn't he on a street after?
He wasn't at the raid in the first place, since it shows he really was spending more time with his family. In any case, it was the moment things went bad on television that Sung would leave the room and make the switch.
Yeah.
It seems he stopped the TV from working too, since he likely didn't want his mother to see he was a hunter yet. Unlike how Sung's mom already knows in the anime, in the manhwa and novel, he's still keeping it a secret from her.
Okay,
he didn't want to burden her with the same feelings their dad did. Now, switching back to the raid, since saving Cha was the #1 priority, that meant getting everyone out was the most important.
Yeah.
It was before they could that's when the Ant King would appear, once again depressing
the aura,
every
man.
viewer who was watching.
I love the black and red,
Since the last time they saw it, it was demolishing their hunters. Now they were worried the same thing was about to happen again. After eliminating Cha in one hit only, no one really thought a ranged mage type would do any better. So Beck would be the first to offer assistance, but Sung would insist no one step up at all.
Yep.
Reason being that to him the fight would be way faster if they didn't. It was a suggestion not many of the others could fully get behind, but decided to respect anyway due to the power Sung exhibited back when fighting the Swarm.
Bro, that's
This
fire,
was
dude.
actually why Beck thought Sung needed help to begin with, since with all the summons he used to clear the Swarm, Beck figured he'd be running low on mana now.
Bro,
He
he's a
was worried
physical
that Sung may run
assassin
out of
type
magical
too.
energy mid-fight or something. This was a concern.
He's a
that only
assassin
went to
mage.
confuse Sung, since maintaining his soldiers
A mage
always cost
assassin?
him nothing. If you remember from
summoner
one of my
assassin.
last videos, the only time Sung used mana was when he needed to regenerate his soldiers. So
Yep.
his magical energy was rarely, if ever, a problem for him.
Yeah, the only
This,
time is
however,
when he
wasn't
regenerates them,
knowledge
eh?
anyone was privy to, and Sung wasn't planning to share it with them now either. No, he instead simply stated how his summons didn't require as much magic energy as they thought.
Yep.
It was a statement that went to shock everyone equally, since what other weak point would Sung have if not for an unsustainable mana cost?
True.
Sung wasn't gonna reveal any more than that though, so that was a question all would have to sit on. Now, Sung had immediately
Bro, I'm glad they
recognized
gave
the
him
Ant
his
King, and
cape
the
or
Ant King
coat.
immediately recognized him. Both were extremely powerful entities, but the Ant King's observations of such was spoken the exact same way that Goto once did. This brings us now to their face-off, where
Bro,
Sung's close proximity
fire.
to the Ant King would lead viewers to think the outcome was already decided. I mean, here was this monster who just ragdolled Korea's sturdiest tank, and here was Sung casually walking into melee distance of him.
True.
The Ant King would see this as an opportunity to end the fight in one hit only, leading to the punch which would shock the world. You see, as soon as everyone saw this mage tank a hit with his face, every person watching was
Yeah.
fully captivated. When the Ant King then got blown away by the return punch, several moments were taken for viewers to process what they just
Bro, they're
saw,
never gonna
and
do these
it's
meme
when they
faces,
finally
bro.
did, cheering could be heard everywhere. The Ant King fully expected to at least send this new opponent flying, but
Bro,
when it
this
neither
panel goes
died nor
hard,
even
dude.
budged, Sung barely gave it a moment to feel surprised. No, he instead immediately responded with punches of his own. They were hits whose impacts were strong enough to literally
They're
shake
just fire,
the entire
man.
tunnel. The cameraman was struggling to understand the power he was witnessing, since after seeing this ant destroy 6 S ranks like they were nothing,
True.
he never thought he'd see a display of force stronger than that. Like, he was leagues behind the S ranks above him, then they were easily gapped by the Ant King earlier. So, for Sung to come in and stomp the ant like that, well, the notion someone could be so powerful was just absurd to him. Now, when Sung saw his return punch did less damage than expected, he fully resolved himself to brute force this victory.
Dude.
If all he needed to do was bypass some armor, then
That is
that's
sick.
exactly what he was going to do. The ensuing clash was a back and forth spar of hits so powerful that the reverberations of energy was enough to make those in proximity sick. The cameraman was the most susceptible, so he
Yeah.
was even experiencing a bit of vertigo. Still, he maintained his composure and even smiled, since who wouldn't when what he was broadcasting was their country's shining ray of hope?
Mm-hmm.
For the Ant King who was on the receiving end of this beatdown,
Right.
though its exoskeleton was likely more durable than any metal on the
Look at
planet,
the fucking eyes,
Sung
dude.
was still punching his way through it easily. The Ant King knew cracks were forming all around it, but he couldn't tell how bad it was due to a lack of pain receptors there. This in turn forced him to divert his attention to check it out, revealing the cracks had spread all across his entire body.
Yep.
Sung wasn't so naive as to miss out on this opportunity, since the moment he saw the Ant King was distracted, that's when he would hit him square in the face. It was a vicious impact that made clear beating Sung in a battle of strength wasn't possible. Luckily, the Ant King knew it had other attacks, leading to
Bro,
the
the
paralysis
poison.
poison skill it developed through gluttony. That went exactly as we saw, ending in another ferocious punch that for the first time actually dealt damage.
Mm-hmm.
The impact from this one finally made the Ant King feel pain for once. That's when Sung would clue into the Ant King's emotions, which was an ability he first picked up back when he fought the High Orcs. He
Cool.
didn't think
So
much
cool.
about it then though, because there he thought he was simply reading their facial expressions and gestures. Now that he was reading a monster that had no facial expressions, that's when he started to think perhaps perception unlocked some sort of new ability.
Okay.
So, Sung would go on to use this in more ways than one, since sensing its fluctuating emotions now allowed him to track its presence easier. Where the Ant
That's
King's
dope.
speed usually enabled him to lose his opponents quickly, Sung could track him even if he lost sight of him.
Yep.
He could also read his emotions in a way that allowed him to know what it was planning. So, when the Ant King's anxiety changed to happiness, that's when Sung knew its strategy had changed again. Now, the reason the Ant King didn't engage with Speed to begin with is because it essentially wanted to show off its kingly powers first. Now that
Where it got fucked.
working though, the Ant King knew this was no longer the time to flex. Little did he know a battle of speed was where Sung felt most confident, so despite the ant being significantly faster than it was before, keeping up with it was no more difficult than when the fight had first started. This forced the Ant King to fight on the defensive again, resulting in a constant retreat backwards that Sung took.
But the anime did a really good job, man.
With every step back it took, Sung would get more confident knowing full well the type of mental shock it was going through. He could feel exactly how shaken up this ant was.
Yeah.
Then it was in classic Sung Jinwoo fashion that he would first compliment both himself and how powerful he'd become, right before committing to a series of attacks which would finish the fight. The ant's
so cool.
skeleton was all but shattered now, so Sung could go in with Critical Strike to finish it off. So it was after landing Critical Strike dozens of times over that's when the skill would upgrade itself to Mutilate. His stomp of the ant was what enabled this skill to evolve mid-fight. It was the damage from Mutilate which would cause the Ant King's survival instincts to kick in, leading it to fly away much like how we saw in the anime. What the ant saw behind it, though, was the absurd sight of a human flying.
Bro, that's so sick, man.
This wasn't Sung's insane speed propelling him through the air, but rather his ruler's touch skill elevating him to the same level the Ant King was.
That's crazy, man.
The Ant King would then resort to the only move it thought it had left, only to be shown it didn't even have numbers on Sung. Any advantages he thought it had was always immediately disproven.
Fucked, man. Overwhelmed.
Shadows would then make light work of the Ant King's army, including Tusk, who Sung felt the need to give an extra warning to. Since his attacks were especially dangerous, Sung basically said if any of them hit the humans, then he would never summon Tusk again.
Bro,
now,
I wish they added these little interactions.
The end of this was a pure sense of terror unlike any he'd ever felt before. For the first time in its life, it knew fear.
Yep.
It also sensed what it could only describe as an insurmountable obstacle, since no matter how hard it tried, it knew it could never beat Sung. So, in these final moments before its execution, all the ant felt was complete and utter defeat.
Yep, to run away.
It felt absolutely inferior knowing it couldn't fulfill its sole purpose for existing. The queen made it to deal with the strong humans, yet when the strongest appeared, it couldn't do anything. This was the existential thought the Ant King dealt with, while all Sung was focused on was the potential soldier
he got obliterated, man.
So, in order to ensure that process went smoothly, Sung first needed to make sure this ant was dead. He would finish the job all while commenting how now the Ant King was looking like a proper insect. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode.
Okay.
This was
I can't wait for the next episode, man.
I'm glad that I get to share part of it with you. Now, as we near the end of the season with one episode left, I hope some of you will stick around to see what I cover next. I do these videos for other anime too, so if you want to know more about shows like ReZero, Danmachi...
Alright, that was fire. Knowing, just like the little details being cut out. Some stuff with like the order being changed, also like the action or like the sequence of some stuff being changed. Like for example, right, not showing his mom, making the TV not working and stuff like that, which is cool. And I like that. And then also, they didn't really cut out too much. I think this was like definitely the best episode of the series. It was just fucking insane, man. Next episode's gonna be not so insane, right? It's gonna be like downtime. It's gonna be like the funeral and all that shit. Like if you haven't read the manhwa, a little bit of spoilers here. It's just gonna be a bit of downtime next episode. There's not gonna be nothing too crazy, I think, unless maybe they do like an insane teaser at the end. Just trying to think what there is. Yeah, I think there will be a little bit. But yeah, fire content as always, any news. And I hope you guys enjoyed that reaction. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment down below what you guys think. And I'll catch you guys next time. Laters.